Okay, just very quickly, we were talking about Thomas Aquinas and proofs of the existence of God, and we said there are three different types of proof. There are empirical proofs, there are physical scientific proofs, rather. Uh, then there are mathematical proofs, and then there are logical proofs. And what Thomas Aquinas really does is prove God with logic alone. He thinks you can actually prove the existence of God if you take seriously logic. And this is what it comes down to often, the question of the extent of logical principles. And do logical principles actually exist? Do they actually reflect the world? It was kind of like the question we saw with Plato. Is mathematics real? Does mathematics reflect in the world? And Plato said, man, uh, if mathematics is real, then where are the numbers? They're not material things. They apply to material things, but where are the numbers? And that's the reason for Plato's splitting the world in two. Similarly, Thomas Aquinas argues that if you take this logical principle called the principle of causality or the principle of sufficient reason, every effect has a cause, right? Everything demands an explanation. This is what's known to Thomas and in philosophy in general, in the history of philosophy, as the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument for the existence of God, from the word cosmos, meaning world. Thomas Aquinas says, you look at the world, and he gets this from Aristotle, by the way. Aristotle used the same proof in the physics and the metaphysics. He says, if you look at the world, you see that things are in a causal relationship. That is, everything is moved by something else. And there can't be an infinite regress of things moving each other or causes affecting each other. We'll use them synonymously at this point, moving and causing, even though there's a little bit of a distinction there in Thomas. Don't worry about that. Point is, you see cause and effect in the world. Then you reason all the way back, and it can't go all the way back. Because if it goes all the way back, that's the same as saying there is no initial cause or initial starting point, if you will. So Thomas says, if you take seriously causality, if you take seriously explanation, then when you ask, where does the world come from? That has to have an explanation based on the principle of sufficient reason. The principle of sufficient reason is everything has a cause or everything has an explanation. Why should we not apply that principle to the world? What is the explanation for the world? Now, even whether you think the world was always existed, or it started in time with the Big Bang. Thomas didn't know about the Big Bang then, so he's assuming that the world didn't know, or may have always existed, even though he believed by faith that it was created in time, or time was created with with creation with God. He's saying, forget about the Big Bang, because we could just easily ask, what caused the Big Bang? We're in that same problem. Thomas is saying, even if the world always existed, that doesn't explain it. What explains the world? Okay? What explains the world? The only thing that can explain the world is a sufficient reason, namely God. Okay? So whether you think the world had a beginning in time and the Big Bang, what explains the Big Bang? Again, we're taking that causal principle of logic very seriously. Or whether the world always existed, what caused it to exist? I remember when I was 5 years old, I think 4 or 5 years old, I'm walking on Main Street with my mother, and maybe I was 3 years old, doesn't matter. I'm looking around the world, and I said, "Mom, where did the world come from?" Because I was realizing, well, wait, things are caused by other things. Things are caused, and it occurred to me at 3 years old or 4 years old to say, "What caused all this?" My mother said, "Well, that's God," and I went, "Oh, God." Right? And it's interesting. A child can see the obviousness and logical demand of this proof, that logic demands an explanation. We don't have an explanation for the existence of the world. We don't have an explanation for what caused the Big Bang. I remember they asked atheist scientist Richard Dawkins about this. What caused the Big Bang? And he said, we're working on that. We're working on that. The idea of the Big Bang is, and I'll put this in the next video, I think I may have showed this already in class, is that the universe came into being out of nothing. Well, what explains that? Nothing explains that. And if we take logic seriously, we have to give an account of the world, of the universe, okay? And of course, a common objection, by the way, just to respond, would be, well, what explains God? What causes God? Well, God is an uncaused cause, or he is something, or it is something that explains itself. It's explanatory. And this is important for Thomas, because the universe doesn't explain itself. But with the idea of God, an all-powerful, eternal being, who's omniscient, all these qualities of God that you're probably familiar with, that at least explains itself. Now, that's an interesting question in and of itself. What causes God? Why is God God? But it's not a logical impossibility to have a being like God. But what Thomas is saying is, according to the cosmological argument, the universe demands an explanation. And if we take logic seriously enough, there you go. You get God. So the argument is very simple. You don't have to know this. I just want you to understand the cosmological argument is the argument from logic, from causality, that the world demands an explanation. It's certain and evident to our senses that some things change or move. whatever is changed or moved is changed by another. There can't be an infinite regress of movers moving one another or changers changing one another. There must be a first unchanged changer or a first uncaused cause or a first unmoved mover. By this we mean God. Okay?